electromagnetic fields. That is an interaction of electricity and magnetism that surrounds us. Measurable, can be listened to, can be bought. And I'm not going to read the whole chart, but you can look at it. This paper is formed around conversations with lots of people, but most recently the amazing thing was having a conversation at the table at the back of the Prelinger Library with David Keenan, where we talked about the differences between seeing the body as a mechanical or electrical metaphor and how this shows up in other areas as well. And then the very next week at the same spot, at the same table, Megan Prelinger was describing this very distinction between the mechanical and the electrical metaphors, phrasing it in very much the same way to another group of people. In the Prelinger Library, I've seen photos of live cats with heads cut open to put electrodes on their brains to test the effects of LSD and amphetamines. I have been in many strange territories in that library. Many of the sources are cited in here. I have read letters and books that point to a time when the electrical metaphors of the body were a common assumption, a world in which so much was understood differently before the airwaves were so bought. Electricity had a history of being much more than it is allowed to be today. I'm trying to impose some kind of sanity on the description of this invisible world to show that we already know, show what we already know that is not recognized any longer for some reason. One of the first electrical signs to be displayed in the 1890s read, Payne's fireworks. I am trying to cancel out my own interference. I just want people to start to see them, to know they are there, to know how to measure, because it could be useful and because it is something else to notice and because it gives many clues. A moment ago I had it, now I don't have it. To know how a force and matter are not easily divisible. So spiritualism was this movement that emerged concurrently with the telegraph being invented. Both were some example of the transmission of information to another person in a distant location. Spiritualism was a common thing for the general public to believe in and take seriously. Women, especially adolescent women, were highly respected as mediums, and in many cases used this as a political forum, a way to get away with saying anything they wanted. It was excused because they were understood to be transmitting a voice from elsewhere through their bodies as a medium, not that they were just saying what they thought. Two of the most well-known mediums, Kate Fox and her sister, admitted that their seances were hoaxes, that the rapping in the walls that they produced to mimic ghosts were actually created by their skill of popping joints and cracking knuckles without revealing they were doing it. However, they had gained great power and influence through this hoax. They were able to speak and promote conversations about things which were silenced, and generally of more concern to women, while the telegraph was transmitting financial information and expanding commerce. Spiritualism was not only a widespread and publicly visible sensation, but also a means of articulating the often highly radical aspirations of subordinate political formation. How can we apply this to struggles today? What does it even mean to refute, to say something didn't happen, as in the Fox sisters, to make it unexist? Could they be doing a real seance and also faking simultaneously, to be stealthy? What other situations does that call to mind? What does it mean to take something back? What is the danger of being a medium? And a lot of that was compiled from this book, Haunted Media, Electronic Presence from Telegraphy to Television. Dung beetles find their way around by GPS from light from the Milky Way. It's the way they leave the dung pad. This study is from South Africa, where cloudy nights are not that common. And this is a piece from Ann Boyer, an excerpt from The New Inquiry. The animal model of inescapable shock. If an animal is inescapably shocked once and then the second time she is dragged across the electrified grid to some non-shocking space, she will be happier than if she isn't dragged across the electrified grid. The next time she's shocked, she will be happier because she will know there's a place that isn't an electrified grid. She will be happier because rather than just being dragged onto an electrified grid by a human who then hurts her, the human can then drag her off of it. If an animal is shocked escapably or inescapably, she will manifest deep reactions of attachment for whoever has shocked her. If she has manifested deep reactions of attachment for whoever has shocked her, she will manifest deeper reactions of attachment for whoever has shocked her, and then drag her off the electrified grid. Perhaps she will develop feelings of attachment for electrified grids. Perhaps she will develop deep feelings of attachment for what is not the electrified grid. Also, how is capitalism not an infinite laboratory called conditions? And where is the edge of the electrified grid? So that again was from Ann Boyer. Is this real? And how does one get out once they're in, from a long, long time ago? I'm working on that. EMF as healing or harming, electrostimulation healing broken bones. Even Western medicine does this at certain times, but doesn't extend the metaphor. Microwave weapons from the government, one named active denial. It stuns and claims not to harm because it shows no immediate biological effects. Power lines, radar stations, etc., resistance to building in UK, Taiwan, Sweden, etc., etc., noticing a higher incidence of cancer in areas in which the high-density emissions, organized websites popping up everywhere and then disappearing 2 years later. Tesla coil, such clean energy, copper drawing from the earth. Viz electrical substances such as amber, when rubbed, attracts a feather or other lightweight materials. The how of organizing, how hard it is having to organize and negotiate around identity issues when you just want the power to shift, but it can't. Could it be another strategy somehow to guide some of the struggle against things that max out the electromagnetic capacity, such as power lines, radar stations, since these are precisely the things that deplete the beautiful things many civilization haters would want? Less man-made EMF concentration sites would mean more forests, more wildlife, less military, less development in general, less cancer, less tracking, less surveillance, more emotional balance. A discovery of the things that were already there. A slowing, assessing, and creativity as a necessity of life rather than extraneous to survival. Will Alexander told me that if a human from another time were to enter our society, they would instantly die from the frequency difference. I think about this every day. Emotional stability, mental health seems to be intricately linked to electricity in terms of our nervous systems operating electrically, and the vast forms of electrical methods to monitor or alter them. This hour that I say extends to animals and plants as well, that also exhibit galvanic response to spikes in others' emotions. And this is from a Derek Jensen interview with Cleve Baxter. Cleve Baxter has conducted hundreds of experiments showing that plants respond to our emotions and intents, as do severed or crushed leaves, eggs, fertilized or not, yogurt, scrapings from the roof of a person's mouth, sperm, and so on. He's found that if he placed oral leukocytes, or white blood cells removed from a person's mouth into a test tube, the cells still responded electrochemically to the donor's emotional states, even when the person is out of the room, out of the building, or out of the state. The distinction of electromagnetic sensitivity is not an important distinction. Sensitivity is sensitivity to all the stuff in the air, any change in some mysterious density. How is it a substance? Asks Aaron Begg. This is where it connects to ghosts, mediums, all these potentials that anyone could have. Some enter at a level of sensitivity that is already extreme, but anyone can attain or change it. Emotion is electrical, as is the body, but the emotion is easily changed, as the electricity is easily calibrated. We just don't often know this when we're inside of it. According to Adorno, metaphysics consists of a necessary dialectic between form and matter. If the materiality of social thought were to destroy all possibility of transcendence, he argues humans would be forced to live at the mercy of hylozoist priests. Similarly, if abstract rationalism were to rule without regard to social mediation or human will, he argues human societies would fall under the spell of annihilating rationalism. Adorno seeks to maintain the dialectical tension between form and matter as a guard against these two cosmoplastic possibilities. And that was from David Mikulski and XCP. The cell phone that went in the water will regain its function if you dry it right, but pay attention to what it does when it's wet. Ava Illouz's Cold Intimacies, The Making of Emotional Capital. In this work, she noted that as internet dating has gained momentum, descriptions of romance have lost their electrical metaphors, lightning, magnetic attraction, etc. So a paradigm shifts as electrical metaphors lose meaning for a large section of computer-type folk, as if the computer absorbed it, canceled it out. The amount of selections and choices absorbed it. The electricity has to flow somewhere. Dark Cross in the Field of Electromagnetic Radiation from 1898. This is a paper I found referring to how frequencies operate always in the space of interacting and canceling one another out, creating a cross shape. And that article is being passed around the room. It might be abstract, but if you believe in wireless internet, you already believe in it, and it is measurable. Jesse FF has an app on his iPhone that measures the frequency of different parts of his body. Now he's telling me about chakras. I look down at the ground while I'm waiting for a bus and see a fragment of a page that describes how to stimulate the hypothalamus by humming, therefore combating the ill effects of electromagnetic radiation, calming the nervous system. The magazine clipping said that phrase on it, electromagnetic radiation. It really did. And there it is, under my feet. I heavily don't want to be abstract or new agey. John writes to me that a quartz watch is a quartz watch because the quartz is making it tick. The frequency is an interval that can be followed. ECT basically uses bursts of electricity in the brain to produce a mild seizure. ECT might be more logical than all the pushing oneself to exercise so much just to combat the constant desire to hide, bury, not love your friends. The recognition of the frequencies that can be seen and heard would be another way to be observing without judging. It would be a focal point people could start to explore as the repression of the government gets stronger. I think everyone could agree that they would not want to get cancer. I think people know that they feel better in their bodies in the thick of the woods. I want terror to disappear that will not go away for some of us unless some of us find other ways to fight. Some things will crumble alone. Some things are not worth fighting for. Sometimes the infighting is not worth it. So sometimes there are months of crying and reading, and another topic to discover poses the possibility that there might be another way to do this that doesn't cause people around to be so angry or scared. If we learned to live without electricity, or remembered how to harness electricity for healing, as it can be used, what would change? Forget it. I don't expect everyone to focus on it. If I had some people to talk about electricity with, maybe we could figure something out. Nico Peck tells me in the car that shamanic things are a possibility. Gaussian curve, Ton says as I'm typing. From deliberations over the unknown, the unsensed, and the unsayable, public protest and the 3G development in Sweden, by Linda Sonnerd. And this is a really strange section because you can't believe it's in like kind of a critical paper about EMFs basically and how people don't want the 3G things to be built. This was a few years ago, I think 04. Emotions as described in earlier sections can be understood at pre-reflexive level as the style of the flesh or as corporal attitudes. It is the style of the flesh that gets reconstructed within culture. Such reconstruction only takes place when we become aware of our style of the flesh or corporal attitudes towards the outer world. This happens when our style of the flesh is challenged and the act is inhibited. The inhibited act functions as a trigger for reflection and forces us to rethink and adjust our own acts toward the other or the thing. From the something that stops us and makes us reflect, we can move on and articulate our reflections. This is nevertheless not the same thing as articulating the inhibition. We can never articulate the inhibition because it is a pure bodily and emotional reaction. It is pure in the sense that it is not thought, but something that stops our thoughts. It is an instant. The articulation is a way to get through the obstacle, allowing us to continue. The inhibition stops us from moving, and the articulation in thought, speech, or gestures makes us move again, but in another direction than before. And that ends that quote. Yosef and RV marching around with a glittery Tesla sign outside the PG&E headquarters, trying to gather enough people to demand they free Tesla's papers. Looking at riot cops and seeing all those canisters hanging off of them, something is wrong. The energy system, the way the electricity is used to make all this shit is stupid. And this is from a paper about Taiwan. From social perceptions of risk to initiation of collective action. 06-07. In mid-2006, one local resident in Yancheng, who used to repair radar in the Air Force and later became the leader of a local protest group, discovered several medical cases such as cancers, hearing impairments, and strokes that had occurred in his village from my interview with him on March 8, 2010. In addition, some of the workers in a fishery field near the radar station inexplicably passed away. One household adjacent to the weather radar station had 3 children who were diagnosed with mental development issues and problems. The community residents have long suspected that such disproportional medical problems in this community are a direct result of their daily exposure to electromagnetic waves from the weather radar since 2000. Many in the community are now calling for the government to dismantle this weather radar station. We have that germ already. We are somewhat immune or numb. We are not a fishing community with a huge spike in the atmosphere with a radar station. It has been accumulating stealthily. I am trying to cancel out my own interference. I don't care if it's new agey. It's not an identity designation. It's a vehicle. It's that paper. And I'm just going to do one very old piece, meaning like 6 years ago or something, a more lyric one. As to, let's behave as such, so as to get help. Behave as such to get help. Be consistent so as to not believe that help is needed. Continue to prove that help is needed through such behavior. Please just be consistent as such, as much as proven as to be proven, to prove to decide, to make a decision. By talking, we started to make a decision, so as to enter behaving. As to the day I went to Radio Shack with you, we were about to build a circuit, and we spoke of fluorescent horror movies and the way we would design a day, the way we would design a life, the way horror is there, the way we can decide. Let's build something. It's all too bright. As to the day we watched the fountain and I told you of all my real and imaginary diseases, and you said you still don't think I'm a leper. As to the day I tried to explain a speech pattern and why it never goes forward the way you want it to, all linear, exasperated. As to the day I decided to explain to you not to eat KFC. If you love the chickens, you know those chickens can't stand up, don't have legs to support them anymore. Bred that way, says Al Sharpton, says the flyer, but also says my facts. And we laugh because it's true. We laugh. As to the day I explained that I constantly break electrical devices with my body because the currents are so strong. Oh, yes. As to the day I charted the mental state of the attraction because the validity of it was null and void, and I hate the way I can't get out of the head box. Awareness is the first step, isn't it? As to the day you told me that my sunglasses were called sunner shades, and I couldn't believe the police always pulled you over seeing your scar and your skin and your dreadlocks, but of course they do. They're cops, and I said they'll never know what a good person you are. As to the day you came in with sunglasses after the funeral, poised as ever, but your friend had just gotten shot, and I thought it was immigration, but I didn't want to ask because I barely knew you then. As to the day I told you off because you were making me work like a dog, just like a boss, but I really just didn't know how to say no. Fault, 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 fault. As to the day you made me consider that synthetic materials exuding toxins are just as gross as leather, as long ago as that was, tell it all to the vegans, it's lodged there. As to the way you felt like just another Latina that got pregnant when you entered that clinic, you told me, and I said that I felt the same way in the clinic, though I could never feel the same way for the same reason, but it's just the clinic, the terror of the clinic. As to the day we walked in the woods, and as we watched our feet walk on the dirt, you said that we learned from going to things we called parties that others called raves, how to walk through a crowd gracefully, and how other people still don't have this skill, you noticed, and how you still constantly pursued dancing and other people even as you got a real job. As to the day we discussed why vegetarianism wasn't really it, I didn't necessarily agree with you, but you were talking about a theory of putting the bone in the soup for strength, and why would we as humans be too good for the darker part of the meat? Why wouldn't we value all parts for their uses? As to the day you told me that you had indeed stopped seeking out new people to know. That's just how it goes, you said, and how you'll probably start again soon. As to the day you told me about circular time. As to the day you told me you could hear your own nervous system. As to the day you told me that you let the homeless person in the restaurant and he had a coffee, and even though he yelled at customers last time, this time he just had a coffee. It was okay. We need to let the person who we might perceive to be homeless come into the restaurant and have a cup of coffee. You were so mad when I kicked him out. You live in the space of the as too, because you all could never be in a room together, as you all may strangle one another or never get along. You all connected by this and worth so much because of what you said and did. As to the day we sat around the table and talked about what it would be like to be silent for a week, the reasons why people talk or don't talk, and what it would mean to be silent, and you started to drift away and just weren't interested, and I appreciated you so much for not dissecting as I appreciated them for dissecting. As to the day we realized everyone thought we were lesbians, whether we were or not, and that was somehow very satisfying, so we laughed all day. As to the day you told me as a child you couldn't stop ripping the leaves off the plant, you couldn't stop taking apart toys, your mom would get so mad, I completely understood that urge. And similarly, I would pull out the intricately crocheted curls on the doll my grandma made me, or cut the beautiful curls one by one off the pink lion. As to the day you told me about your friend's terrifying experience with an abortion pill, and your own experience with abortion, and I clutched my stomach and felt grateful about all the things I was lucky enough not to deal with. As to the day you listened to me cry in public in the sun and grabbed my hand across the table in public. As to the day you both told me that you'd been in intensely physically abusive relationships for years, and I was so blindsided by that because you were such amazing and opinionated women. As to the night you told me that you cut yourself for most of your life. As to the night we would meet to work on the project, and you would tell me how proud you were to be a Marine, and I would yell at you and ask you if you would kill for your country, and you said you definitely would. Yet you called my AWOL boyfriend the assassin, and we would argue a lot, but then I would hug you and we would laugh about it. As to the night you told me we both need to learn to respect ourselves. As to the night you showed up at my door with blood on your face and we had to go out into the alley with knives tucked in our sleeves to retrieve what we could of your stuff after you were pistol whipped, and you never know how it's going to feel when someone you love gets hurt. As to the night we walked out into the middle of the frozen lake and everything was glowing and reflecting off the ice. As to the night we ran into the ocean with all our clothes on, or was that the day? You live in the space of the as too, because you all could never be in a room together, as many of you all may strangle one another or never get along. You all connected by this and worth so much because of what you said and did. As to the day, as to the day, as to the day, as to the night, as to the night, as to the night.